It's an icon of the 20th century. Sleek curves, sexy, and loud. The electric guitar changed the face of music forever.
Without the electric guitar, you wouldn't have had rock and roll.
It's the weapon of youth rebellion.
That thing is the Holy Grail. I don't care what anybody says.
The electric guitar's sound helped fuel the revolutions of the 60s and 70s. Without it, the world may have never known guitar heroes like Hendrix, Chuck Berry, and Eric Clapton. But how did a bunch of wood, metal, and wires come to define popular music? From the first time a plucked string was amplified to the hot licks of modern-day rockers. Watch and listen to one of music's greatest stories, the history of the electric guitar. The electric guitar's evolution is a rich story of invention, people, and music. Come along on a rip-roaring journey as Smithsonian experts uncover the stories behind the birth of the electric guitar. Famed guitar maker Paul Reed Smith rebuilds history.
Oh, it works! It works!
Guitar player historian Richie Fliegler demonstrates some unintended outcomes. The musical star rocks through the ages. G.E. Smith is best known as the guitar hero of the Saturday Night Live band. But few know his background as guitar history buff and vintage collector. G.E. often plays gigs in this downtown New York City club, but today he's come for a special performance. Along with musician friend Kobe O'Brien, G.E. will be playing through the history of the electric guitar, one instrument at a time.
1, 2, 3.
The story begins with the acoustic guitar. The instrument has its beginnings in Spain over 500 years ago. After many centuries, a guitar revolution is about to begin.
These are guitars from the late 20s, early 30s. This is as loud as the acoustic guitar ever got.
At the time, America swings to the loud, brassy tunes of the big bands. Hot band leaders like Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller take the solo, while the lone guitarist is stuck in the rhythm section.
You couldn't hear the guitar players. They were chopping away at the guitars, kind of like this. A 1, 2, 3, 4. It was loud, it was good, it was rhythmic, but it wasn't loud enough. They needed the electricity.
The limits to the volume of the acoustic guitar are built right into the instrument. 6 strings stretched across an open chamber vibrate when struck. This sets the top moving, amplifying the vibrations, turning the guitar into a pump or speaker cabinet that pushes sound waves through the sound hole.
A 1, 2, 3, 4.
The acoustic may be losing the volume war to the big bands, but these soloists better enjoy center stage now. The guitarist is about to plug in. In the 1920s, inventors, inspired by the marriage of electricity and mass production, eventually create an explosion in new electronic products. Anything seems possible.
But don't let anyone ever tell you that the day of miracles is past. Fascinating problems are all around us, just waiting to be solved.
Professor Tom Wheeler is the former editor-in-chief of Guitar Player magazine and author of several books on guitars and amplifiers.
People sitting around saying, what if? What's the coolest possible thing? What if we took this and we wired it up to that? Is it going to blow up? Is it going to work? Is it going to be great? So you have this wonderful sense of experimentation, and there was something profoundly optimistic about it all.
Monica Smith is a project historian for the Smithsonian's Lemelson Center for the Study of Invention and Innovation.
I think the interesting part about invention is how quirky it often is, and that the people who get started in invention usually aren't thinking long-term about some product on the market.
Inventors don't have to look hard to find the tools to electrify the guitar. They begin by trial and error, tinkering with the electronics at their fingertips. Paul Reed Smith is a current-day inventor and guitar builder. He is the third largest manufacturer of electric guitars in America.
This is the technology of the day. You've got early phonograph, you've got handmade radios that turned into real radios, that turned into microphones to feed the radios, that turned into sub-movies. You've got headphones and speakers on your ears. Basically, this is the technology of the day that they had to start with to make the electric guitar.
Taking advantage of the electronics of the day, inventors are often running. But can we trace the electric guitar to one inventor?
It's really hard in invention to say who was first, but it's part of what's intriguing about invention to me is the complexity of the story, and that there never is just a simple answer. And the more you dig, the more you realize that often there were a lot of people working on a problem.
PRS, Rickenbacker, Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, all names associated with the most important musical instrument of the 20th century, and all innovators face the same initial problem: turning a plucked string into an electronic signal. Inventors look to phonographs and telephones, machines that translate electronic signals into audio waves. The result? What's now known as the guitar's pickup. But how did the inventors build it?
Start with a magnet. Obviously, magnet, right? And we're going to make a coil, very similar to the coil that was in this old handmade radio. And I'm going to wind a coil on this magnet. I'm going to probably put 70 feet of wire on here, but on a real pickup, put about a mile on.
Paul's combination of magnet and coil is called an electromagnetic pickup. The vibrating metal guitar strings create a disturbance in the field surrounding the magnet. The coil picks up that disturbance and sends an electronic signal to the amplifier.
I now have a coil wrapped on a magnet. And I'm going to take my jack cord, wire it up, and we'll see if it works. We'll get an acoustic guitar here without the back on it. Let's see if we can't electrify it. Bingo. It works. So, this is about 70 feet of wire, right? So let's put a mile of wire on. A lot more turns. You can get a lot more current out of it, right? And the drummer might need a PA system to keep up with a guitar amp, right? So, electrified guitar. We're beginning to get off to the races here, all right?
The evolution to today's high-wattage guitars involves a famous cast of characters, but historians point to a lesser-known tinkerer working nearly 85 years ago on one of the earliest innovations. In 1919, Gibson hires famous instrument designer Lloyd Loar to design a new line of banjos and mandolins. But Loar's passion is for electrification. One of Loar's first attempts is the Model U harp guitar. Skip Majora is a vintage collector and owns Loar's guitar.
when I first saw it, I knew it was something that was very unique and there to tell me a story about the evolution of the electric guitar.
Lohr's guitar pickup slides out from the body. He creates an ingenious way to plug in.
There was no jacks, like guitar plugs at that time, so Lloyd used actually the light bulb socket from an old Model T as the receptacle for the plug. And he had at the other end of it a radio that had recently been invented at that day, which had an amplifier in it.
Lohr realizes the pickup alone doesn't make it louder. It needed an amplifier. Once again, inventors adopt available technology.
And so what they did was they started taking radios and making a place to plug a guitar into it, all right? And eventually, they came out with a product that was designed to play guitar through. Now, if you look in the back of this radio, you can see that it has a speaker and amplifier tubes. If you look in the back of this one, amazingly, it's exactly the same thing. You've got a volume control, a way of plugging it in, and amplifier tubes for amplifying the sound to drive this speaker.
The electronic signal from the guitar's pickup hits the amplifier. Vacuum tubes, or transistors, boost the signal's strength. It's routed through the coil, which disturbs the magnet's field. The coil vibrates, which moves the speaker's cone, pumping air, producing sound. Despite his ingenious innovation, Lohr won't become famous for it. Gibson management rejects his radical design. His instruments never go into commercial production.
Of course, in retrospect, we could say, oh, that's crazy. Of course, the electric guitar was going to be this great invention, but at the time, nobody knew that.
Other valiant independent efforts are made in the 1920s to electrify the instrument. And just a few years later, a sound revolution is about to erupt. Swinging to the big bands is the 1930s rage. But so is swaying to Hawaiian music. And who would have guessed that the seeds of the electric guitar craze grow from Hawaiian music? In 1932, famous Hawaiian musician and inventor George Beecham teams up with factory owner Adolf Rickenbacker. They design this peculiar-looking electrified guitar. They call it the Frying Pan Hawaiian Lap Steel Guitar. With a long neck attached to a small round body, it does resemble a frying pan. Made of cast aluminum, it featured a large electromagnetic pickup that arched over the strings. The frying pan went on sale in 1932.
They were marketed. The word was out. And you would see notable players playing frying pans. Was this the first electric guitar in the history of the world? Maybe not. But the Rickenbacker frying pan, I think, has a legitimate claim to being the first commercially successful electric guitar.
All right, now it's the early 1930s, and we're ready to plug in. And it's called a lap steel, because you played it on your lap with a piece of steel. Now you had some volume to work with.
The frying pan helped liberate instrument makers, proving that electric instruments didn't have to look like their acoustic counterparts or be made of fine materials. Gary Sturm is a curator of musical instruments in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History.
The most amazing moment for me was when I first saw the frying pan electric guitar. And I have to say, it was just, what was remarkable about it is this very humble instrument. But yet, that was the kernel of the idea that grew into this really amazing technology.
The frying pan was a hit with the musicians, but not with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. They questioned whether the instrument was operative.
So Rickenbacker ends up having to send musicians into the patent office to play for the patent examiners to show them that this thing actually worked. And finally, they end up getting their patent in 1937. The problem is at this point, it's been on the market so long, and other guitar makers are already involved in the idea and the marketing of electric guitars, that the patent really doesn't do any good for Rickenbacker.
After 4 years on the market, the frying pan was heating up the industry. Walter Carter is a guitar historian and author of 8 books on vintage guitars.
By 1935, the people at Gibson are going, oh, well, maybe there is something to this. You know, there was a guy back here in the 20s named Lloyd Loar. Maybe he was right. Here's what they did. Gibson thought, we'll make it look more like a guitar, but Rickenbacker's doing pretty well with an aluminum guitar, so this is what we'll make. This one is actually number 6A, so probably the 6th one that Gibson made in 1935. So that was Gibson's entry into the electric guitar market.
While the lap steel is electrifying the world of Hawaiian music, there's another major tributary in this fast-flowing river of invention, electrifying the acoustic guitar. Gibson built their reputation as expert acoustic craftsmen. Finally, in 1936, they electrified their acoustics. They placed a pickup under the strings close to the neck and called it the Gibson ES-150. ES stands for Electric Spanish, and it cost $150 with its amplifier. That would put a musician back over $2,000 today.
It did not have that workshop tool shed vibe. It did have beautiful woods. It had an elegance. It wasn't the utilitarian Rickenbacker frying pan, which just added to the appeal of the electric guitar phenomenon.
Okay, now we got a really well-made instrument here that's electrified. We got volume, power, ready for a whole new world. Go. I want 2, 3, 4.
But it takes more than just the invention to change music forever. It needs to be played by open-minded artists willing to experiment.
It took a player who captured the public imagination to help spark the popularity of electric guitar, and one person who's really often given the credit is Charlie Christian.
The first electric guitar hero in the history of music. Born of musician parents, Christian first tried the trumpet, but soon picked up the guitar at age 12. In 1939, the 23-year-old virtuoso from Oklahoma City is discovered.
John Hammond, who was a record producer here in New York, heard about Charlie, hooked up with him, took him out to Los Angeles where Benny Goodman was playing. Somehow Hammond snuck Charlie onto the stage one night with Benny, and they started playing, and it just blew music wide open. Charlie Christian figured out a whole new way of playing the guitar because of this amplified sound. He was able to play long, what they call legato lines over the band. I can't play like him. Nobody can. Played like a horn player. It really changed the whole course of American popular music. Charlie Christian is the whole explosion starting point for the electric guitar. As far as guitar players go, Charlie's the guy. That's where it starts.
On March 2nd, 1942, Charlie Christian died at age 26 of tuberculosis, but his legacy lives on.
Musically, what Charlie Christian did to change people's attitude, and even I think you can find quotes from Jimi Hendrix, who was saying he used to listen to Charlie Christian's records and learned what could be achieved on electric guitar, and it inspired him in those later years.
In the 1940s, Charlie Christian's influence extends across musical genres, from the thumb-picking jazz tones of Wes Montgomery to the jumpy rhythmic blues riffs of T-Bone Walker. The musical landscape is changed forever. The new acoustic electrics do more than just quench the thirst for volume, but the instrument has one serious flaw.
They've put a pickup on an F-hole guitar so you can play jazz. But the problem is if you play it up really loud, it starts to howl. And at really loud volumes, the top would vibrate so much that even if you held on to the strings, the thing would howl. So you got to get rid of the speaker cabinet. Here comes the advent of the solid body electric guitar without the speaker cabinet attached to it.
But the acoustic flaw does more than inspire redesign. It sends a creative shockwave through the music world with a genesis of rock and roll. Today, more than 7 decades after bursting onto the scene, the electric guitar is the most popular musical instrument in the world, with nearly 6 million guitars sold every year. That's over 6 times more than any other instrument on the planet. And nowhere is the electric guitar craze better demonstrated than at the Dallas, Texas International Guitar Show. Over 15,000 people flock here in the hopes of fulfilling their wildest guitar dreams.
Biggest guitar gathering in the world. Everything from buying, selling, trading, authenticating, looking at, dreaming about guitars is right here, and we've been doing this 30 years, and this is where everyone comes to find that ultimate guitar.
Looking for a thin line Telecaster, preferably a relic that looks older, has that vintage feel to it. I'm selling it, man. $250 to $300, depends on who offers for it.
But some guitars here are not for sale.
Welcome to the 30th Annual Dallas International Guitar Festival, featuring the Holy Grail exhibit. You need to see this. So stand in line, put up with it. It's worth the wait.
Guitars so valuable, they're kept under tight security.
This is the draw here at the show, and $1 million easily, just for Eric Clapton's 335 Blackie and Stevie Ray Vaughan's Lenny.
Eric Clapton's Fender Stratocaster, nicknamed Blackie, follows him on stage for over a decade. He records the legendary single Crossroads on his Gibson ES-335, and Stevie Ray Vaughan wailed on his prized Stratocaster Lenny when recording all 5 of his albums.
That thing is the Holy Grail. I don't care what anybody says. Clapton started in 1960. I'm looking at nearly 50 years of guitar music history here. It's awesome.
Guitar heroes throughout history revolutionized the way the 6-string instrument could be played. In the hands of rockers like Chuck Berry, Jimmy Page, and Eddie Van Halen, the electric guitar becomes more than an instrument. It's an extension of their soul and redefines popular music. But rock and roll, psychedelic rock, and heavy metal could never exist without this next critical innovation. In 1941, the famous musician and inventor Les Paul tinkers with the problem of acoustic electric feedback. Les Paul strung guitar strings across a 4x4-inch piece of solid pine and placed a homemade pickup under the strings. Paul called this device the log.
No one took the opportunity to actually manufacture that and offer it to the public. It was too much of a tinkerer, gyro, gear loose kind of contraption. Did what Les wanted it to do, but obviously it was not going to be any kind of commercial bonanza.
Paul Reed Smith demonstrates how Les Paul's log is the answer to acoustic electric feedback.
Guitar repairs, imagine that. All right, so here's the next stage. What I've got here is a solid body electric guitar with all the bits cut off it, and there's no speaker cabinet, so it doesn't make a lot of noise. But if I turn it on, works, right? If you turn it all the way up, it doesn't go crazy when you let it go because there's no box to be vibrating. So now you can play loud, and you can make it any shape you want. You can make it the shape of the United States. You can make it the shape of an acoustic guitar. You can pretty much make it any thickness, shape you want. whole new ball game starts.
The Log never goes into production, but Les Paul's name is always associated with the invention of the solid body guitar. But was he really the first? In 1997, Smithsonian curators at the National Museum of American History make a surprising discovery in their own collection, a solid-body guitar born 2 decades before Les Paul's Log.
I just completely went through the roof because I thought, my gosh, there's the proof. The Slingerland company who made this guitar stopped making those instruments in 1940. So we know for absolute proof this guitar was made before 1940.
Will Eastman is a Lemelson Center project historian.
This instrument is one of the things I'm most excited about in the collections. We know that there's a trade literature catalog from about 1939 in which it's advertised, and let's plug it in and see what it sounds like. It has a really strong signal. I'm pretty impressed. For a guitar that's almost 70 years old, this sends about as strong of a signal as some of the newer guitars in our collection.
The Songster is Slingerland's only attempt at selling an electric guitar. They move into percussion instruments, and the Songster drifts into obscurity for nearly 70 years. The Slingerland Songster, forgotten. Les Paul's Log, never put into production. It takes a man named Leo Fender with a mind for mass production to make the solid body a sensation and to kick off the modern electric guitar era.
Turn her on and let her run.
America still swings to the brass bands of the 40s, but Southern Californians warm up to the electric twang of country western music. And inventor Leo Fender is their biggest fan. Fender builds a line of lap steel guitars for his favorite musicians. But by the end of the 40s, lap steels flood the market. Leo decides it's time to take the lap steel off the lap. And Fender has competition. In 1948, a craftsman named Paul Bigsby creates a solid-body electric guitar for famous country player Merle Travis. A year later, Fender comes out with his version of the solid body. So who invented the first solid-body electric guitar?
It's a controversy I don't think anyone is ever going to solve completely, but it's hotly debated, and it's really Leo Fender who gets the credit, but he was only one of many people working on this idea.
The Log, the Songster, Bigsby's solid body, all examples of the complex path to invention. One thing every historian does agree on is that Leo Fender was the first to successfully mass-produce the solid-body electric. Simplicity is Leo's genius, like a bolted-on neck allowing easy replacement. He's really the Henry Ford of the electric guitar.
Leo Fender's Telecaster was not their first electric guitar. He took existing ideas that had been floating around for 15 years. I think the Telecaster is like the monolith that comes to Earth in 2001. And after that, everything is different.
You've got the sound of the amplified acoustic guitar. And then along came the solid body. One of the first people to really take advantage of the sound of this solid body was the great Mississippi blues man Muddy Waters. It sounded something like this. 2, 3, 5.
In the 1940s and 50s, Muddy Waters leads a new urban edge style of blues, born in Chicago, built entirely on the electric guitar. Muddy's smooth electric blues inspires Eric Clapton and the British blues revival of the 1960s. Musicians are warming up to the Telecaster's loud licks, but other guitar manufacturers don't take Fender or his instruments seriously.
It was made by a little guy who had run a radio repair shop at Gibson. This was a joke.
It was called a canoe paddle, a boat paddle, a toilet seat, a plank. This was very utilitarian looking, which of course to Leo Fender was the point. Yes, right, you've got it. It's utilitarian. That's what's so great about it.
The joke is over when Gibson notices Fender taking a piece of their business. Just 2 years after the Fender Telecaster, Gibson introduces the Les Paul Gold Top.
To make sure that Gibson could make a splash with a solid body guitar, they got the most famous guitar player in the world at that time to endorse it. And of course that would be Les Paul, who was already the biggest proponent of this solid body electric guitar. And it's by far the most successful endorsement agreement ever in the history of musical instruments.
Okay, now we're in the mid-50s, and these are the products you'd see in the stores. A Fender guitar with a flat body and a bolted-on neck, or a Gibson guitar with a carved top, which was an innovation, and a glued-in neck. It was interesting that Gibson had discovered that they thought it sounded better with a maple top, and they painted the guitars gold in the beginning to cover it so that Fender wouldn't know what they had done. This is the beginning of the electric guitar era. This is the beginning of rock and roll.
A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3.
The guitar wars between Fender and Gibson leads to even greater innovations and brings about the final stage of the electric guitar's invention. Fender is the largest manufacturer of electric guitars in the world. Their factories in Southern California and Mexico produce nearly 1,200 instruments a day. Computerized lathes shape the solid wood blocks into recognizable shapes. Over 50 years out, and the 1950 Telecaster is still going strong. Fender sells nearly 200,000 a year across the globe. The Telecaster has been in continuous production longer than any other electric guitar. Players love the guitar's history so much, a custom beating is the hottest selling finish on a brand new Telecaster.
My favorite, the relic finish, because you don't have to worry about it. You do whatever to it, and that's the way it is, you know. It's your own, it's an artistic view of how we feel an aged-looking guitar should look. Heavy arm wear, you know, Coke bottles hitting it or beer bottles hitting it, you know. It's 40 to 50 years old and getting it done in about 2 hours, basically.
The success of the Telecaster inspires Leo Fender to create other instruments.
The thunder, the roar, it's just who I am, you know. I love playing the bass guitar.
To Leo Fender, the Doghouse stand-up bass is big, heavy, and impractical. In 1951, he invents the solid-body electric bass guitar.
No one was really asking for an electric bass. Leo Fender just said, bassists need this, and it'll be a good thing. The electric bass changed popular music.
I said to myself, this is the instrument I've been waiting for. My mother really just gave it to me to keep me quiet and keep me occupied. And it kept me occupied. Not very quiet, though. I love it when I look out at the audience and I see them go like this. Because then you're touching them there. They're feeling it. That's what it's about. It's more than a sound. It's a whole experience, a whole feeling, a whole way that you're touching their soul. And it's pretty deep.
With the electric bass in hand, generations of players like James Jamerson and Bootsy Collins pump out hit after hit with a steady groove. The heartbeat of Fender's bass sets the rhythm for entirely new musical genres, from Motown to funk. But winding back to 1951, Leo Fender's story is just beginning. His hands are full trying to meet demands for precision basses, Telecasters, and a growing line of amplifiers. Fender's marketing guru, Don Randall, thinks Fender should worry about Gibson's stunning new Les Paul Gold Top.
Leo, look at this guitar. It's pretty, it's elegant, it's expensive, it's got this beautiful gold finish. Suddenly, our Telecaster looks rather plain. It does look kind of planky. Well, for the people who played them, this is what we love about them. But compared to the Les Paul, Mr. Randall felt we need a line and we need to upgrade and we need the more expensive. We need a Cadillac.
The result? The most influential solid-body guitar ever made, the Stratocaster. The Stratocaster rewrites the rules on what an electric guitar can be.
How do you go from a Telecaster to a Stratocaster? The basic shape of the instruments is pretty much the same. Where it changed was the issues with the Telecaster being basically a square-cut instrument. When players would play, at the time, they would sit down, or even if they stood up or had it on a strap, you could see this area here, their arms would rub against it. And a lot of these guys, you know, after all, drinking a lot of beer, and they had these nice guts, and the guitar would kind of chafe, especially under hot, sweaty lights. So you've got the cutaway on this side. Another issue was with the Telecaster, if a player wanted to play up high here, that this area, this piece of meat here, would kind of be in the way. So one of the first things that was done in the creation of the Stratocaster was to remove that piece, allowing the player's hand to naturally find its way into these higher registers. You have this elbow cut, which allows for a really comfortable feeling where your hand would lay right in the exact spot. And the tummy cut that would allow the guitar to feel really a part of your body. It's one of the great things about the Strat. Whether you're slinging it low or wearing it high or even sitting down, it really feels like a prosthetic device. It's not an instrument. The next change between the two guitars is that in the Telecaster you've got 2 pickups, and on the Strat you've got 3 pickups. You've got a rhythm pickup, a lead pickup, and a pickup in the middle. The rhythm pickup has a much bassier sound. The lead pickup has a very trebly sound, and of course the middle pickup is somewhere in between. In my opinion, the crowning glory of the Stratocaster, though, is this very simple bridge and tremolo unit. The 6 bridge pieces held in place by a row of screws and counterbalanced with a row of springs. You've got these springs pulling the bridge in one direction, and on the top you've got strings pulling it in another direction. And the whole thing rocks on these very simple wood screws. Unlike previous vibrato bars or tremolo bars, this perfect equilibrium made the Strat vibrato come back in tune every time. It was easy to use, and the simplicity itself, pure Leo Fender.
But even with its sleek body and high-tech hardware, the Stratocaster wasn't going to sell itself. It needed some clever promotion and a modern edge. While Gibson brochures pictured conservative-looking musicians like Les Paul in a suit, Fender pictured surfers, fighter pilots, and babes in bikinis with their guitars. The advent of television brings electric guitars to the masses. Suddenly, everyone hears and sees this new invention with all its cool electronics. Thousands buy the new guitars. As generations of players push the limits of their instruments, the focus shifts from guitar makers to guitar players. And for the guitar hero, plugging in means changing history. Eric Clapton is the most revered and imitated guitarist of his generation. In 1963, Clapton leads the British blues invasion, updating the sound of the earliest bluesmen with a faster pace and a whole lot of volume. While inventors like Leo Fender treat amplifier distortion as a major technical problem, everyday players crank up their amps as their creative solution.
I'm going to attempt to take you through some of these things and show you how they were intended to be used, and of course what happened when the nefarious guitar players got their hands on them. So here we have this beautiful little Champion 600 amp and our Fender Princeton lap steel. That's certainly the sound that Leo had in mind when he made these things. But being the guitar players that we are, we just couldn't leave it alone. So we put down our lap steels, but we had this great little amp, picked up our Stratocasters, picked up our Stratocaster guitars, turned them on 10, and lo and behold,
Pushed beyond their design limits, the components in the amplifier give up and distort the sound.
So, louder is better. The next step, used as intended, it was a jazz country amp. Never leaving it alone. It also sounds really good when you nail it. Again, unintended. Leo Fender's rolling over in his grave right now. We have a super reverb amp and the voice of surf, the Fender Jaguar. Cranked up is really a thing of beauty. Around 1975, a gentleman named Randy Smith perfected the master volume control in guitar amplifiers, allowing guitarists to get the sound of these amps distorted at lower volumes. Well, lower volume, what's lower volumes? Who wants lower volumes in any way? So the Fender Supersonic is the ultimate master volume insane amplifier.
The guitar's evolution takes a path of its own. With the Fender and Gibson designs of the 1950s, the building blocks for the modern electric guitar are in place and remain virtually unchanged.
So by now, the electric guitar has pretty much grown up into what it's going to be. And there were a lot of guys that could really play it, too. Then they started coming up with these things that we call pedals, which are add-on devices. Sound comes down out of the guitar through the wire, goes into the pedal, then onto the amplifier. And the pedal itself affects the sound, gives you different kind of sounds. One of the first ones was echo. Without, there it is with it. Then they came up with the wah-wah pedal, which was very popular. But the one that really set everybody free, gave everybody that ability to sort of make it their own personal statement, really expand what they were doing, was distortion. Fun, huh?
One of the ironies of the electric guitar is the original intent of the inventor. And what happened in the end with the people who then took the instrument up and played it is they altered the sound of the instrument altogether. So they took a very clean guitar sound and they made it dirty.
Along came Jimi Hendrix. When his first record came out, me and my buddy sat and listened to it. It was like hearing a foreign language. We knew it was a guitar, but we could not tell for about 6 months what it was doing. And the way that he did that, of course, he was an amazing guitar player, but he used all these pedals and all these new sounds that were available to the absolute maximum. I can't play like him. Nobody can play like him.
as a fan listening to this, I didn't know what that was. It was taking me to a place, not only that was new, but it was taking me to a place that I didn't even know existed. He was doing it on a guitar that was designed in 1954 by a person who would not have understood and certainly would not have liked what Jimi Hendrix was doing with it.
Capturing the voice of an entire generation, the electric guitar becomes a symbol of freedom and rebellion, unifying causes and fueling revolutions of the 1960s. And in 1965, the very foundation of folk music shatters when one man plugs in. Bob Dylan, the most famous acoustic folk artist, picks up an electric. His folk purist fans boo instead of cheer, and the music scene is turned upside down.
This idea that music is compartmentalized, and if you play this kind of music, you look a certain way and you sing a certain kind of lyric and you present yourself on stage a certain kind of way. Well, artists, of course, hate that stuff, and they obliterate all that stuff. And the electric guitar really helped to cross all sorts of boundaries. And Bob Dylan going electric in Newport 65 was only one example.
The electric guitar's scope and influence seems boundless, crossing borders, bridging cultures, and, with historical hindsight, even helping to topple governments.
There was a reflection in the 90s that as the Soviet Union collapsed, that maybe we could attribute this to the universal appeal of the electric guitar and the export of this American cultural phenomenon of electronic music to the Soviet Union.
Through the power of invention and innovation, a 500-year-old instrument is utterly transformed, spawning new musical genres and inspiring heroes. In just 7 decades, this instrument changed the world.
Yo, Kobe. Yeah, good morning.
Now, G.E. Smith and his band are going to capture that entire revolution in a single song. Taking an old-time classic, Camptown Races, he's going to play the history of the electric guitar, instrument by instrument, through decades of sound.
All right, now, what me and the fellas are going to try to do right here is a short history of the electric guitar, starting with this acoustic guitar that you can't hear. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3.
The creativity that comes out of, here's a tool where you can really alter things in a way that the only limit is your imagination.
A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4.
There's something beautiful about it, and it doesn't sound like an acoustic guitar. It doesn't sound like where the instrument started. It's gone in a whole new realm.
To have a way to express yourself in a way that's maybe a little rebellious, maybe a little crazy, maybe allowing you to do things that you might not do on your own, but when you have that guitar in hand, it gives you a special power.
fascinating thing about electric guitar history is that the product has really not changed much since it was invented. And all the innovations have been small, yet major in their effect on our culture as they change music through the years.
In the story of electric guitar, you have so many things about America and about global popular culture coming together. You have invention, faith in the future. You have faith in technology, and you have artistry. You have creativity. All of these things come together in the guitar.